This is the best of First and Last, the podcast, with Mike Golic Jr. and Robin Lundberg.
You know, the one call in there, Harden having Enes Kanter on skates. He's done that a couple times this year. He's got him looking like Nancy Kerrigan out there.
Boy, it's not good. It's not good when you've got modern, I guess I'd say professional announcers, although that's a discredit to their WWE counterparts who are invoking a lot of the WWE terms. I heard the other night, round one of said skating effort, when whoever was calling the game said, "My God, he has a family."
You know, speaking of the WWE, Russell Westbrook, this guy is a force. There's no doubt about that. And I compared his play, watching him play. You know, you ever watch a match and the one wrestler is really tired and being beaten? It's a tag team match, and he keeps trying to get to the corner to tag his partner. He keeps trying over and over again. Then he finally does it, and he makes the tag, and his partner comes in like a house of fire. It's called a hot tag in the lingo of pro wrestling. That's how Russell Westbrook plays. He plays like a wrestler who just finally got tagged in by his tired partner.
And it seems like last night was the first time during the game or in the post game and in the comments that came up that we heard Russell Westbrook referenced as the first wrestler, as the tired wrestler looking towards the sideline by his coach and a few others. Of course, never him, but the idea that for once maybe rest is something that came back to bite Russ a bit here.
You know, and it's going to bring up an old critique of his game. Many people have speculated that one of the reasons Kevin Durant left the team is because Russell Westbrook can go a little nut at the end of games. That's what you say when you're playing pickup ball about the guy who just decides he's not going to pass. And there's a fine line there, because I don't want to go over the top in the criticism of Westbrook. Everybody realizes how important he is to this team. He's had a historic season. He's a great player. And for most of last night's game, he was marvelous. He was absolutely amazing. But he does sometimes take it a little bit too far. There's that line. It's an unspoken line, because no player has ever had as much leeway as Russ has had. I mean, controlling possessions, taking shots, all that, rightfully so. He has a habit, though, and it's not just last night, where when the contest gets tight and it gets down to the stretch of the game, he just loses it a little bit and starts flinging up shots. And last night was a really good example of that, because I don't care who your teammates are, you have to give them a chance. And the Rockets were pinching off of Westbrook, taking away his driving lanes, pinching off of his teammates, taking away Westbrook's driving lanes, and he just would not give up the ball. And some stats to support that. I mean, his 18 shot attempts in the fourth quarter broke Rick Barry's 1967 playoff record for the most shots taken in a single quarter. His 14 misses were the most in any quarter by any player in the last 20 seasons. Of course, if the Thunder are going to do anything, if they're going to win a game in this series, Westbrook's going to have to be a big reason. But there are some moments, even as much a part of that team or a necessity as he is, he has to fall back a little bit. He has to play within himself a little bit.
It is, but it's easy to say that until you're Russell Westbrook sitting on the bench last night for the little portion of time that you were allowed to rest during that game, and watching the rest of your team squander a 12-point lead that you had helped build up, of looking around and saying, okay, I want to trust you guys, I want to count on you guys, and you're showing me that I can't.
But that's not the same thing, right? That's not the same thing. His importance is evident. He has to be on the floor for them to have success. No one would argue otherwise. But when he was in that rest of the game, he wasn't taking the shots at the volume that he did in the fourth quarter. There's a difference between the impact of him just being out there, the attention he's requiring, what he's doing all over the court, and firing up every shot at the rim, even ones that have no chance to get in or just reprehensible shots, really. And you look at the percentages of the team shooting, the rest of the team didn't shoot that poorly. The problem is that they don't have that outside shooting, where you got Robertson 0 for 3 from 3 and Oladipo 1 of 7 from 3. But Westbrook, what he did is not isolated to this year either. It's something that he has done repeatedly, even when they had Kevin Durant on the team, where it's that specific situation. It gets tight, and it's almost like something switches in his brain. I got to do everything. I got to do everything. I got to do everything.
Yeah, that's the one. When we talk about the leeway, the leeway is probably the distance, whatever it is, from Oklahoma City out into the West Coast, out to the Bay Area, because that's when we really started affording it to him. This was something that we used to lob at Russ time and time again when they were together, and now that they're apart, we look at it and say, all right, 43 field goal attempts in a game, we'll understand that, we'll allow it a little bit more, because who else you have to point to?
Well, he took about half of their shots last night, almost. So 43 of 97.
43 of 97. His 43 field goal attempts were the most in a playoff game since Michael Jordan had 43 in Game 3 of the 93 NBA Finals, a triple overtime loss to the Suns. I'm sure everyone loves it when Michael Jordan did it, but now the Russ did it. It's a problem.
Well, look, I mean, I don't care who your teammates are. You have to have some degree of trust in them, especially when you're in this situation. And I'm not going over the top. I'm not saying Russell Westbrook is a selfish ball hog who would never win. That's where some people would take it. But last night, I was like watching the guy like, oh my God, this guy's awesome. And then there was a point where that switched and I went the other way and we're like, dude, what are you doing? You're out of control right now. You have to, he's open. Pass him the ball. Let him make or miss it. You have to give them a shot to prove that they deserve to be out there on the floor because, you got to this point partially due to, these other guys too. It's not like the other starters were terrible. Gibson was plus 17 and Adams was plus 18. Those aren't the shooters, but of course, Steven Adams and Russell Westbrook have worked in conjunction in pick and rolls a ton over the last couple of years.
It's funny too. I heard Ramona Shelburne, a cut from her on the way in on SportsCenter all night, talking about the other players on this roster and how much money, because of the way the NBA salary structure works, how much money, over $200 million in this year pumped into guys like Steven Adams and the rest, and what's expected of them because of that. And I think that does get a little skewed, though, in the NBA because of the way the middle class gets a little bit overpaid, the way it does when you've got a hard cap on what the top players can earn. Because we hear that all the time when it comes to the NFL and other sports where you go out there and you earn that monster paycheck. More is asked of you in that regard. And in this case, while they're technically being paid the same, I don't think anyone is going to ask as much of Steven Adams and Enes Kanter and the likes there as we will of Russ here. So using that justification seemed a little bit false to me.
Time for a little straight talk from Russ, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, half the cost. Here he was at the podium after the game.
When Billy took you out at the end of the third quarter, I think you guys had a double-digit lead. They quickly ran off 7 straight points. You came off the bench. Did you want to go back into the game at that juncture of the game?
I just was mad. Try to get on my teammates and make sure they understand the importance of the game and understand we can't give up leads like that on the road.
Well, you're not a player that's normally associated with getting tired. You feel like in the fourth quarter, playing the whole 12 minutes, did that kind of affect you, your legs on your shot at all? Or
no, I was all right. I was good.
When you look at your line on the box score, how would you grade the line?
I don't give a about the line. We lost.
That was Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable networks. Here was James Harden on his counterpart's performance.
Russell just kept going. He kept going and kept shooting it, and we allowed him to shoot the ball. As long as none of his teammates got involved. That's all that matters. And so, he got his numbers, but we won, and that's all that matters.
Let's explore that soundbite coming up next.
First and last, the podcast.
Russell just kept going. He kept going and kept shooting it, and we allowed him to shoot the ball. As long as none of his teammates got involved, that's all that matters. And so, he got his numbers, but we won, and that's all that matters.
James Harden after the game with Turner Sports. I love how it's listed as Houston point guard. It's odd still to read that. He is Houston's point guard, but traditionally he's been the shooting guard.
Yeah, it still feels wrong. It's constrictive, like a new pair of underpants. It's going to take a while to break in.
Now, those comments very interesting. Look, there's a big difference between the Rockets and the Thunder. It's pretty self-evident, right? The Rockets have that shooting on the outside for Harden, who is a more gifted distributor than Russell Westbrook as well. But they have Patrick Beverley can hit the open outside shot. And Ryan Anderson couldn't hit anything last night, but can hit the open outside shot. Trevor Ariza, same deal. Eric Gordon, Lou Williams. There's a bevy of shooters on that team. At the same time, I'd mentioned just a few minutes ago, the Rockets were clearly playing off of Westbrook to the point where I was basically shouting at my TV, pass the ball. And from the account of Harden right there, Mike, it sounds like that was strategic to bait Westbrook into trying to do everything, and it looked like last night he took the bait.
Yeah, there's a pretty easy fourth quarter book on this guy, and it's to the point now where he's deep enough into his NBA career where we have to ask. And really, if you're Oklahoma City, I feel like you've already made this decision, which is this is the Russ you choose to live with. Like, he's deep enough into his NBA career where I don't imagine some sort of massive shift off this point for him. And so is this just something they've resided themselves to? Like, all right, we're Oklahoma City at this point. We've lost one of our stars. We want to keep our other star. So the only way we're going to do that is by allowing him to be him in the fullest extent of that term. And clearly he hasn't shown the ability to be self-aware enough to change this or have the belief in his teammates to feel like he can change this. So you just take this bad portion of Russell Westbrook, knowing that it's the same portion that was tied to the only reason that you were leading in this game for so long.
Well, I mean, the way he played for most of the game, I guess I'm not sure exactly what happens, but again, it's that tightrope, and all of a sudden he jumps to the other side of it because everybody understands he's going to take a ton of shots. He's going to dominate the basketball. He's going to be the driving force behind the Thunder. But he just goes too far in some of those situations, the habitual line stepper, right? And when you are playing a player, there's always that book. Carmelo has that book on him where teams are trying to get the ISO Melo going so that it becomes predictable. LeBron, well, the way the Spurs used to try to guard him was to give him that 18-foot jump shot. Say, take that 18-foot jump shot. It's a little different in the modern era versus the old-time era because, or not old-time, but, a previous era because the defensive rules are different. Now you can play these quasi-zone defenses. Before, let's say Michael Jordan, for instance, you either were going to send a hard double team or you're going to play a man-to-man. It's not quite the same, but with Westbrook last night, you clearly had the Rockets saying, all right, dude, go ahead, take the shots because we're not going to give you the drive. Because we're cheating off of your teammates here, the driving lanes are not going to be there. So either you're going to pass the ball to that guy or you're going to fire the ball up at the rim, and he chose to fire the ball up at the rim.
Well, he's putting to test what everyone claims they want is the guy that wants to take that last shot, that wants it all on him in the fourth quarter. And what we've seen is mixed results so far. Well, you're right. It probably is a case of him going over the top of the line. But to the point you just made, we saw LeBron James do just that 2 games ago at the end of the game. We talked about a bad, quote-unquote bad three-pointer that he took at the end of the game that could have put them in that compromising position to fall victim to that shot where the other team clearly understood, all right, we would much rather have LeBron shooting from out there where we know while his numbers have been up this year, that's traditionally not the best version of LeBron. And so we sag off and we let him take that and bait him into it, and he takes the bait. Frustrating as it may be to some of us watching, guys are still going to go out there and at some point just default to what they think they can do in that moment, the confidence they have in themselves.
But there's a difference between a given possession and every possession. And last night I thought, in the fourth quarter, it was essentially every possession for Westbrook. Everybody takes bad shots. Everybody makes stupid decisions, turns the ball over. Westbrook just went full-on nut at the end of that game. After playing, he was incredible for 3.5 quarters, I would say, almost. And then the last, 7 minutes of that game, it just, he went crazy.
How much of that could be, and just thinking out loud at this point, knowing this is his first playoff run without Kevin Durant, and looking around that moment he did on the bench last night, watching that 12-point lead go away, where he looked out there and he really went, oh my God, I really am all alone in a situation where now the end result is, if I can't get it done, our season is over. We're not going to get to the ends I want to. We're not going to get back to where I was just last year and all of that. Because, listen, for as much as we talk about this being the book on him, this was the most extreme case of it we had ever seen. This was the most overreaction in the fourth quarter statistically by all these different metrics that we had ever seen from Russ.
But it's very reminiscent of some other time, including Game 7 last year against Oklahoma City. If you remember, in the fourth quarter, he had a stretch much like that in Game 7. Now, Kevin Durant, you could lay some blame at his feet for the way he played down the stretch of that series once they had a 3-1 lead. You guys can weigh in on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, 888-729-3776. Choose Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline for the best total engine protection you can get. Let's go to Trey in Ohio. Trey, you're up first here on First and Last. Go ahead.
Yeah, buddy. Just like you guys were saying, Russ was just a victim of a good game plan by the Rockets. They just basically said, "Hey, Russ, beat us by yourself." Not many guys can do that beyond LeBron James.
Well, I don't think anybody can really do it, right? I mean, that's part of the point. I brought this up with Paul George's comments. I reject the notion that one player should always be designated to take the last shot, or if that's something admirable. It's understood that the best player is going to control the clutch possessions, whether it's passing the ball or shooting the ball, or sometimes seldom being a decoy in that sense. But you even go back to LeBron. I mean, LeBron's been criticized throughout his career, but I remember him passing to Donyell Marshall in the corner for three-point shots on that team that got to the finals to play the Spurs with Boobie Gibson and the likes, Jamario Moon, people you've probably never heard of. So even when LeBron was on those teams, he was passing the rock in situations even while dominating the basketball. There's no one who should take every shot down the stretch of the game, and you're sort of going against the spirit of basketball when you're not passing the ball to the open man, when it's blatant, when it's the defense saying, please, we dare you to shoot the basketball.
But to your point right there, LeBron's been doing that forever. That was always who LeBron was. That was part of his MO, and we just recently, because we finally got the evidence on the back end in championships to justify it, started coming around and say, oh yeah, maybe he is right about all this. But you knew that was who he was. He was going to do that in those key moments. This is who Russ is. You know this is who Russ is. And if you're Oklahoma City, you hitched your wagon to him knowing full well that was the case.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, nobody's sitting here saying they got to get rid of Russell Westbrook today either, right? I mean, they wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for Russell Westbrook. I'm talking about last night's game, and something like if you're, let's say we're doing our jobs, right? I would love coaching. Here's what you're doing well, here's what you're not doing well, all that sort of stuff. Same thing goes for even a player of Russell Westbrook's stature, where it's like, Russ, let's take a couple of deep breaths in your nose, out your mouth, namaste. Dial it back just a little bit in these situations because, yeah, I get it. The pressure's on you, and you feel this responsibility to use your only friend, Spalding, and get things done on the court. But there are other guys on your team because, for the most part, he's always playing that way. He's always dominating the ball, but it's not to the point of almost parity. And last night, it got to the point of almost parity at the end.
And I'd wonder what it's like to be, because like you said, this has been the story for his teammates all year of reacting to this. And I come from a sport where you're so codependent on one another, you can hardly ever get to a situation like this. But to understand that even though Russ got up in that presser and said, I trust my teammates and I believe in them, he doesn't go out there and show it in key moments. And so there has to be some sort of, all right, message received if you're the guys sitting around him in that locker room.
First and last.
And something I always tell myself, I don't know what a miss is. Like, it's over. A miss is a lady. So, you just forget about it. It is what it is, and you just move on to the next shot. So I just continue to just stay locked in, and, everybody's confident in me. Coach is more than confident in me, so I just rise up and shoot it.
Bradley Beal with the big shot. And what was a pretty good game. We'll see how many people saw it, but a pretty good game between the Hawks and the Wizards last night.
The old NBA TV game.
Literally.
I can be perfectly honest. This game didn't do a ton for me, and we understand that the NBA TV games sort of get labeled that in general just because it's on a channel that not even everyone gets around this time of year. But for me, I turned on that game. I think it was in the second quarter. I came to it late. I had finished making dinner or something. I sat down. I was like, all right, get ready to dial in on this a little bit. And I watched for about 10, 15 minutes, and I realized there's really not a whole lot here for me, and I thankfully at that time had the OKC Houston game to flip to, and did just that and never looked back.
It's funny because I was doing the opposite. I watched the fourth quarter of that game and didn't flip over to the Oklahoma City Houston game until it was over with, and then I, of course, watched the duration of that game. First and last here on ESPN Radio, presented by Progressive Insurance. Last year, over 3 million drivers switched to Progressive. Call or click today and find out if you could save. Something worth watching, I think, in that series and with the Wizards has been John Wall, by the way. Sort of underappreciated. I could make an easy argument that he could be in the top 5 MVP candidates this year when you get beyond Russ, Harden, LeBron, and Kawhi Leonard, that fifth spot. like I would argue John Wall over Isaiah Thomas, for instance. But he had a heck of a year this year. And in some of these series, you just watch and it becomes so clear, glaringly clear who the best player on the floor is. And in this series, John Wall is so far and away the best player on the floor. It's kind of like in the Bulls series with the Celtics where you see it happening with Jimmy Butler a little bit. But Wall's ability to get up and down the court and his ability to find his teammates off of the drives as well. If you're looking at passers out to shooters, the best guys in the league to me are LeBron, Wall, and Harden.
Yeah, Harden is just Harden. Wall is just sort of a victim of what we've seen from Westbrook and Harden this year. I know you're famously on record of saying LeBron James is the son. Well, this year, Harden and Westbrook, their MVP race, their closely contested battle, has been the sun, and trying to see anyone else has been like trying to see stars in the daytime. It's just not going to happen because you're blinded by these performances that we've been fed night in and night out from these other guys. But now we're getting towards a time of year where it becomes easier. Because we've got all these games played in isolation and much more time to sit down and digest it, we get to appreciate this maybe in a way we weren't before.
Meanwhile, the other game last night, the late night game, and by the Warriors is a draw. I saw the ratings information came out yesterday. I don't have the specifics in front of me, but the opening round of the playoffs did very well, and the Warriors-Blazers game did very well in particular, which shows you the drawing power of Golden State.
Oh, I mean, for all the good teams that we have left, when we talk about Cleveland and Houston as great passing teams, there's not a more fun team that shares the ball on offense than Golden State. It's incredible to watch the creative ways that they get each other involved.
Golden State-Portland Game 1 was ABC's most-watched NBA playoffs opening weekend game ever. Game 2 last night, the Warriors put it on the Blazers. No Kevin Durant, no problem. And to me, what stands out there is you talk about sharing the ball, and we know about all the scoring. The defense, when Golden State, the only thing that they can have an issue with defensively is just like an otherworld force of nature. Really, we're dealing with one player, right? LeBron and Kyrie, who have given them some issues, but somebody who can take it right into their teeth of their defense and challenge the rim. But when they lock in otherwise, they're able to like take a guy like Damian Lillard and make him look almost obsolete. Yeah, Damian Lillard minus 33 on the floor last night, just 12 points in the game. And you look at the quarter-by-quarter breakdown, not only did Portland only score 81 points, but to me it stands out the first quarter the Blazers had 17, and the third quarter they had 12. So in the points of the game where the game is starting, right? It starts in the first quarter, and it restarts in the third quarter. And the Warriors are totally locked in. Defensively, they were out of this world good.
And when you don't get those otherworldly performances on the other side from Portland, I mean, C.J. McCollum and Damian Lillard basically played out of their minds in Game 1, and to come back and have 12 and 11 points respectively in this game, it does speak to that. And the other side for Golden State, I mean, how do you want it? They'll give it to you anyway. JaVale McGee was their leading scorer in the first half last night. I think he finished third on the team in points overall for the night, 15 points for him in just 13 minutes.
You know, and with Golden State, by the way, Charles Barkley after the game said they're not a good defensive. Sometimes you just have to be like, what are you talking about, man? You know, when we bring up his basketball takes at various points. I don't know where that knowledge or that opinion can possibly come from, because what makes them so devastating defensively is the way they're designed and constructed, which is sort of the antithesis of the rough and rugged teams, right? Which can be their one weakness, the one small hole in the Death Star. If you have that perfect pinpoint, accurate player to attack that weakness, maybe it can be exposed. But otherwise, because they can switch everything, and because they're so quick and all that, they really swarm you. And so that's what happens to other teams, because it doesn't matter if you're using a screen or what have you. Somebody else is just going to pop up on you. You know, Draymond Green can guard you on the perimeter. He can guard you on outside. Andre Iguodala, you know, can cause havoc that way too. Sean Livingston with long arms defensively. He didn't play last night, of course, but the team, the way they're designed that way, that's how they do it to you. It's not because they're huge, but it's because they're quick and they're versatile. So no matter what you're doing, somebody else is able to switch out onto you and take away your driving lane or get a hand in your face.
And because we talked about the other day, because you've got a guy that demands it from you. Like Draymond Green is going to demand it from everyone else on this team. And there's something to be said when one of your stars demands that kind of effort in those areas from everyone else in the locker room. It's a powerful thing. thing that's hard to really replicate if you don't have it in the world of sports. I mean, look at the stat line that he put up last night. He's sort of their water finds its level point, that old phrase. He's that point for them. You know, in 30 minutes last night, 6 points, but 12 rebounds, 10 assists, 3 blocks, the prototype Draymond Green game. And he always seems to really fill in that role, to fill in a lot of the cracks when they aren't whole. When Steph was out last year, we talked about him stepping up. Now that KD's out for this game, and when he was out in stretches, we see him sort of become more pronounced in all those different ways. He's such an interesting factor for that team, and something that no one else really has.
Jason in Indiana. Jason, you're on First and Last with Robin Lundberg and Mike Golic Jr. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know it's a different sport, but is the Russell Westbrook situation just like the movie Any Given Sunday, when the team basically just gives up on him and he tries to put it all on his shoulders, and they're all just like, you did it to yourself. Because, I mean, he's just trying to do too much. He can't do it all by himself. No one can. I mean, even greatest in history, Michael, LeBron, they can't do it. He's not them.
I don't think anybody gave up on him last night as part of the problem. You just got to give the guys a chance to help you out.
It is. We've seen all season an otherworldly individual performance, and he wants to invoke football. It's sort of like what we saw out of Aaron Rodgers down the stretch in the NFL season, where you saw something so completely out of this world as far as output from a single guy, but the rest of it wasn't built to sustain, and so much became reliant on one person's ability to do something that at the end of the day, you knew it was going to come crashing down. It wasn't built to last.
First and Last.
After the show yesterday, I had just gotten home and scrolled through Twitter and see the breaking news that Aaron Hernandez, of course, former NFL tight end for the New England Patriots, according to Massachusetts prison officials, hung himself in his prison cell on Wednesday. And, Mike, the reaction to it, to me, was interesting to see the scale, where people were on this, because you have, on one side, some saying, frankly, good riddance, this was an evil person, and you had other people saying, they were sad regardless of what he had done, because this was a bit of a tragic tale. And it's not an easy thing to get the proper handle on.
No, it's not, and that latter take specifically, I know, because that was how I felt, and I couldn't give you a good reason why, but I was the same. I walked out of here, I walked over into the gym, and I saw it on the TV in there, and my immediate feeling was a wave of sadness, and it wasn't sadness for Aaron Hernandez, and that's the way so many people take it when you say something like that, because the overwhelming reaction you should have, according to everyone else, is good riddance, all this other stuff, but it was just a sad reminder of everything that had taken place over the course of this event, and the people that he had hurt, and the people that he continues to hurt now, with this being his family, his daughter, is a 4-year-old daughter that he now leaves behind, that is going to have all of this in her wake at some point as a part of her story. And it is a sad reminder of how far someone can fall despite what we may see from the outside, how the picture may never look quite exactly like what we perceive it to be.
And, the NFL and the Patriots in particular have sort of tried to scrub him from their history, understandably so, but it is something that took place. He was on the Patriots. He was a very good player, and he did do some of these things, and it became a running joke, considering the, murder is not a joke, obviously, right? I mean, it's a serious atrocity. People's lives are ended. Other people's lives are affected. It really isn't a laughing matter, but because of Aaron Hernandez and how public it was, and how it seemed to be like, oh my goodness, and another story involving him, to the point where last week, he has charges dropped, or he gets off on a couple, and you realize, no, he's still serving life for another one, right? And that's part of the story here. And I guess if I'm going to say how I feel about it, to be honest, I'm not sad that he's dead. I'm not happy that he's dead. I don't think there's a moral to this story. I don't. The people I feel for are the victims, his daughter, as you mentioned, and anyone else who was negatively affected by this saga. I don't know what to take away from it. I don't know if there is a takeaway. I'm sure there'll be some talk about perhaps studying his brain. I don't want to give any excuses or lay any blame or even speculate to what could be a part of that. I'm just searching for other aspects of this or things that could come from it. But basically, I don't think there is. I don't think there's something to go, eureka, here is the conclusion to be drawn from this story.
Yeah, there's no cautionary tale here other than this doesn't have to be a sports story, because for so many people, even when I brought up the idea of being sad, there was certainly the other side that corrects and say, no, you can't be sad. But there was also the side that says, yes, a guy, a wasted talent. And that's not what this is about. Like, it doesn't matter that Aaron Hernandez was a football player and then chose to do all those things. It heightens it in our mind because he had so many of these things that we perceive as markers of success, of being in the NFL, of having all of this life-changing money, all these things that could pull you away from that. But this is a story of a human being and the choices that he made over the course of his life that led to these moments that harmed other people. And if you're looking at maybe something there, it's just that, is that we are the sum total of our choices. And at some point, regardless of everything else that's given to you, those choices clearly led him here. And it's tremendously unfortunate for all the people involved that you mentioned. And, there's a lot of interesting loose ends with this that will get tied up legally for the things going forward. A lot of people questioning the very nature of what did happen in that prison cell. I know Adrian Lawrence, who works here, does SportsCenter updates, was on Russillo and Cannell yesterday talking about, for her, needing to see some definitive proof that what we are being told happened as a suicide is actually what happened in this case, and some of the legal ramifications of what happens now, that technically, because it was before the appeals process, he is no longer guilty in the state of Massachusetts, and that has ramifications going forward for the families of the victims that may be looking for damages. This could indirectly benefit Aaron Hernandez's daughter going forward and allow her to keep more of the money that her dad had saved up. So there's a lot of interesting things in this that will not involve the person who committed all these heinous atrocities, but now will affect going forward everyone else with that piece removed.
Now, there's never a natural transition from a story like that, but the Patriots were in the news for a number of reasons yesterday, including their current tight end, Rob Gronkowski, who decided to interrupt Sean Spicer at the White House yesterday.
Can I just need some help? I think I got this, but thank you. Maybe. I'll let you. All right, thanks, man. I'll see you in a minute. Hold on. All right, that was cool.
It's got to be good to be Rob Gronkowski, where basically everything you do is spun as lovable. He's basically Kramer, right? He comes in the door and the laugh track ensues.
He is. He's got the Midas touch at this point. There's nothing he can do wrong. And it's the other way, where it's cool to be seen around Rob Gronkowski. I mean, who else is walking into the Oval Office and just casually fist bumping, the president sitting there? That's something that Gronk is uniquely afforded, because his stock is always... I shouldn't say his stock is that high right now because he was hurt for most of last year, but that's just the strength of the brand that he has built right now. He's this lovable cartoon character of a football player.
Now, the brand, speaking of brands, not that you generally think of the White House as a brand, but it comes up as a topic here because the Patriots visited yesterday. There was a photo circulated by the New York Times, sort of reminiscent of the inauguration photos that went out. The inauguration photos of when President Obama last time was inaugurated versus, of course, Trump in this most recent time. And the Patriots themselves took to Twitter to dispute the photo in question, which is interesting because they said these photos lack context. Facts, in 2015, over 40 football staff were on the stairs. In 2017, they were seated on the South Lawn. And to me, the most interesting thing about this is that the Patriots, with this particular administration, seem to be going against the quote-unquote Patriot way, because that almost sounds like something that they would have been asked to do by, as an arm of the administration.
Well, it's just, you're right. It goes so counter to the narrative. And we saw this during Deflategate when Bill Belichick came out and held that famous press conference where he's quoting My Cousin Vinny and talking about, the different ways temperature can affect it. These weird instances where they do break form a little bit, and that was one of them because someone else would have made those claims on behalf of the Patriots. Someone else would have brought up those pictures in comparison. That was not on the Patriots and their Twitter account to do, but it does speak to the strange place that we're in now because this isn't the first time that people have elected not to go to the White House for a sitting president. That being said, this is also a unique time period now where athletes feel empowered enough in their opinion that so many of them have voiced that, no, this is the exact reason I'm not going to the White House. It hasn't just been scheduling conflicts. Think Tom Brady wasn't at the White House yesterday. I mentioned scheduling conflicts with his mom being in town, et cetera. There have been other guys that have come out and said, no, this is definitively a political action, and that's sort of new.
Yeah, and I don't think it's athletes being empowered necessarily either as much as the commentary on where we are. I mean, like if we're going to be frank about it, we're not dealing with a normal administration. We're not dealing with normal times. So in 2015, there were about 50 guys who showed up. This year, there were about 34. Wouldn't be a story normally. It's a story because it is now a controversy whether you go or not, and because guys are explicitly saying they're not going to this particular, it's not Democrat, Republican, it's this particular administration and making it known, whether it's Long or, whoever else is out there saying it. So I think that is the overall commentary to me where visiting the White House has become a subject of controversy.
I still think it's guys feeling more emboldened to make those points the way they have in the last couple of years, whether it was the NBA players, whether it was Colin Kaepernick. Guys feel more entitled than ever to share their opinions and their beliefs, and that's why these stories keep becoming bigger.
First and Last, the podcast.
Generally, if we've done a show for this long and we haven't mentioned the NHL, we hear from Hockey Guy. Maybe we've done a good job because Hockey Guy hasn't even yelled at us yet, but we'll throw him another bone today. This is for you, Hockey Guy.
This one's for you, Hockey Guy.
Scandella for Prosser. Prosser to center. Here comes Hansel into the zone. Takes a shot. He scores! Hansel with a nice move across the blue line. Beats that one, and the Wild have a 2-goal lead now.
Krejci with 10 seconds. Up ahead to Backus. Now Bergeron at his own blue line. Makes his way to the red line now. Krejci off now to Pastrnak. Into the zone left side. Krejci, a wrist shot blocked into the corner. Backus trying to center one. Is blocked, and that's it. And the Ottawa Senators with a 1-0 win in Game 4.
Kept in by Nylander. Gardner with a chance. Blocked down by Oshie. That comes out of the zone. 3 seconds left in 2, and that is going to do it. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Toronto. For the first time in the series, it ends in regulation, and Washington wins it by a score of 5-4.
Flames kick it. Back to the point for Stieg. To the other point. Broken up by Getzlaf. Has the puck. Getzlaf open net. Scores! Ryan Getzlaf has wrapped it up for the Anaheim Ducks.
The call is courtesy of K-Fan, Capitals Radio Network, KLAA, and 98.5 The Sports Hub.
I tell you, is that last call not emblematic of the NHL playoffs as a whole? That 4 games into that Washington-Toronto series was the first game that ended in regulation. We just are so conditioned to see that out of the NHL playoffs, these tightly contested games that go down to the wire. You had a team in Minnesota stave off elimination, which is nice to see for them. Great fans up there in Minnesota for the Wild, really buoying that team. Washington evens the series at 2-2. They're the team that's fighting against history on this side, sort of the Clippers of the NHL in that regard. And then the Bruins, it's going to be a tough one. Russillo and Cannell, Ryan does his hockey recap every day in the Boston tones there. Going to be a tough one as they're now down 3-1 in this series to the Senators.
You know what's odd is I understand because they play at the same time, but there's this like feud against basketball from hockey fans, from against the NBA, which is understandable to a certain sense. But isn't there a cross section there? Right? I mean, wouldn't you want to welcome those people in rather than saying it's a either or sort of situation? Because we don't do that with many other sports. And if I was the NHL, I wouldn't even be going against basketball. I would advertise against baseball. I would say, here's a 30-second clip of a baseball game, and here's a 30-second clip of a hockey game. Which one are you choosing?
Well, you're also working against the beginning of the season. Once you get past opening day, the shine wears off, and we're waiting around to get to the meat and potatoes of baseball season that gets to stand on its own for so long. You can say, hey, listen, you got plenty of time for baseball. Come on down to the ice. It's nice and cool in here. We got good snacks. It's a great time.
First and and last.
All right, so you got 4 quarterbacks, Mel, in your just plain old mock draft going. You got 1 in your grade A mock. Why the difference there?
Basically, David, I didn't want to overdraft. That was the reason.
What do you mean?
Because all the quarterbacks will be overdrafted. Okay. I didn't want to fall into that pattern. I went by my ratings.
Okay, Todd, how did you have? Did you not have a quarterback going in your GM mock draft?
Yeah, I had zero quarterbacks in the first round.
So basically, what you guys are saying, for the most part, is that you got 1, but you have none of these guys have first round talent.
Yeah, none.
Wow. How bad of a year is
We're just messing with you, man.
Did you tell me? Killing me here. How many questions do I have to ask to get an answer?
We decided
questions David Lloyd's ever asked.
So serious today. You pull all these stunts on us, and we figured we'd mess with you.
All right, that was fun. Can we do this again?
Mel Kiper Jr., who you guys took, Mel, the term mock draft to a new level, it seems like there.
Well, David, I thought it would be good to play along with it. So, we just always are told to rap. We're always told to not talk as much as we normally like to, and we always take segments a little longer than they should. So we figured let's really be quick and easy and real succinct answers, which we usually never give, and quick answers like that we usually never give. And David was struggling a little bit with that because I think he had about 5 questions. We went through 5 questions in about a minute and a half, and he was thinking, what the heck am I going to ask these guys? And so we decided early on yesterday to do that, and we may do it again. We may do it just honestly again, where we just try to be more to the point and not ramble on like we normally do.
Well, I got to imagine a certain amount of that is just to entertain you guys, because it's got to be difficult this close to the draft with how long you've been doing all this prep now to keep it fresh on your end.
Yeah, well, I think there's so much. As you know, there's so many different things you can get into, but the focus is always on the quarterbacks usually, and obviously whatever stories are front and center. But it is a draft where you can get into a lot of things beyond just the storyline of positions. I mean, there's a lot of guys who have medical question marks. Character question marks are always going to be there. How do you weigh them in to the equation? Everybody's going to have a different opinion. And obviously it all gets back after we talk for hours and days about certain things. So obviously all comes full circle and gets back to the quarterbacks.
I'll start, and I'll take the bait on that one. I'll start with the quarterbacks. It's interesting, and I heard Louis Riddick saying Patrick Mahomes could potentially be that second quarterback taken in this draft. He's moved up to that range. What's been the difference for him since the season ended? Because I saw right coming off of actual football, he was maybe the 4th or 5th quarterback prospect in this class, and he has skyrocketed in the postseason process. What's been the difference for him?
Well, I think a couple things. The time between the end of the season and now allows you to go back and really look at a player and figure, okay, how can we take what we saw in college and translate it to the NFL? And you say, okay, the system hurts him coming out of that Red Raider offense. Same thing Jared Goff and numerous others, RG3 came out of. Bryce Petty and all those guys. But you look at the arm talent, and I think that's what I think people were looking at, saying all these other guys don't have the arm talent of a guy like Patrick Mahomes. He can, and the thing that I like about him, and I think they like, is we're sick and tired of watching college football games where guys complete 35, 40 passes, and majority of them are behind the line of scrimmage or 5 yards down the field. I call them bubble screen sensations. He's not. And normally those guys in that offense are, but he will extend plays with his legs, which I think is underrated with him. He's not he's not going to be Johnny Manziel running around, but he can certainly like I say, keep defenses honest with his legs and get first downs and keep the chains moving. Plus, he just takes shot after shot down the field. I mean, he has no conscience about throwing into coverage, which you say that's not good, but in college I like it because we don't see anybody do it. So, to have confidence in your arm, stick it in there. You see a couple defenders, you see a receiver, go for it. And he does. And I think that's going to be the reason why he ends up being, I think, the second quarterback off the board like Lewis does. And I think he could be a mid-first round pick.
Robin Lundberg, Mike Golic Jr. talking to Mel Kiper Jr. here on ESPN Radio about the NFL draft, of course. And Mel, it's been about a week. Last week, the big topic in the draft was the potential of Trubisky passing Garrett as the number 1 overall pick. How solid at this moment is Myles Garrett as the number 1 overall pick to the Cleveland Browns?
I'd say 99.9%. You never say 100% because you never know about a trade possibility. But even if it is a trade, it's going to be involving Myles Garrett because somebody's going to want to move up to get him. So we can talk all we want about Mitch Trubisky. If Cleveland did that, it would be shocking, mainly because they passed on Carson Wentz last year. And if you didn't like Carson Wentz,
How can you like Trubisky at number 1 with 13 starts? I mean, that's automatic a red flag. That's automatic. You just look at the history, and that's what you go by. History, is a way to predict the future. And you look at it and say, okay, coming out of North Carolina, he didn't exactly have the most consistent season. It was a little uneven, but he's got talent. He deserves, I think, to be a first-round pick. But come on, number 1 overall for a team that's going to need a quarterback right away to be a factor. They can't keep going like they have been. Now, they have Cody Kessler, who could be kind of a bridge to Trubisky. He's not going to be ready as a rookie, and we say that about Goff, but yet he had to play. And if Trubisky has to play, the results will be similar to Goff. So I just look at it and say, no, the pass on. If you're going to pass on Garrett, guys, then you trade out of there and you move down and you still get Trubisky because, let's face it, 6 is probably the first opportunity for anybody like the Jets to possibly even consider him with that pick.
Mel, how big of a concern, I know he was a guy that just did the car wash here at ESPN not too long ago, is that shoulder of Jonathan Allen? Because I've seen for a lot of people Solomon Thomas making that jump over him in certain mock drafts. Is that something that's a bigger deal than we've made it out to be?
I don't think so. I think it's just it's there. It's not going to, evidently, from what people I speak to, bother him until way down the road when his football career is probably over. Didn't affect him at Alabama when he was dominating. He went back for his senior year when he could have come out last year and been probably the 19th pick to the Buffalo Bills. He's going to go in the top 5. Now, is he going to go as high as Solomon Thomas? That's debatable. I think I've had Solomon Thomas going 2 for months, and I've had Jonathan Allen going anywhere between 3 and 4. So they're right in the same area. It's really who the best fit is, and the best fit for San Francisco wouldn't be another DeForest Buckner or Eric Armstead. It would be probably Solomon Thomas. I think Jonathan Allen in Jacksonville as a 3 technique would be an ideal fit because they brought in Calais Campbell. Well, they wanted Dontari Poe, who ended up in Atlanta. They really want to get after the way to beat that teams in the NFL now is pressure the quarterback and cover on the back end. Linebackers who stuff the run, defensive tackles who can't get off the line of scrimmage but just occupy and or run stuffers. Those days are over. They're over. You saw Sean Robinson and Jaron Reed from Alabama go in the second round because they weren't viewed as pass rushers. Now, both of them had good rookie years, but they weren't first-round picks. So you're going to see corners, safeties that can cover. Like I said, you have to adjust to the times now. And these days we're worrying about how many safeties ever went in the top 5, how many corners ever went in the top 5, this, that, and the other thing. This is a different era now. You can't. This is where history means nothing in terms of what positions have the most value, which positions are going to go high, which positions shouldn't go high. Throw it out the window. Throw it in the trash can. It means nothing.
To that point, Mel, one of the more interesting players in the draft to me is Christian McCaffrey. And also interesting looking at your mock draft, you have him going to Carolina. At 8, how emblematic is that of the way the game is played now? Because, in the past, let's say a player like Darren Sproles, I don't think would have been drafted that high, or he wasn't. And nowadays, I think those kind of players are invaluable, the sort of jack-of-all-trades running backs.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen things happen in the draft where Dexter Carter went in the first round because Dave Meggett was having a great career. Then we see Sproles last until the 4th round. So everybody's kind of been all over the place. But now I think those kinds of players, and McCaffrey is certainly a guy who can be, I think, a running back who gets the job done, not with 25 carries, because nobody needs to do that anymore. They have Jonathan Stewart in Carolina. They don't need McCaffrey or Fournette to be the main entity right now. But I think you look at his receiving ability, you watch him. Just watch him in the slot. Watch him run routes. Watch him look like a slot receiver, not a running back. I mean, and then watch him return punts and kickoffs and do everything you need a football player to do. And I think that's what we have to get back to. Jabril Peppers, great football player. You're going to worry about where he played. He was coming to slot. He was coming to slot receivers as 2 years ago. He's getting after the quarterback this year as a linebacker. Everybody's worrying about it. Is he a safety? He had 1 career interception. Jabril Peppers didn't have many opportunities to intercept passes. And Christian McCaffrey did it all at Stanford in a pro offense for David Shaw. So let's just get back. I think what it gets back to now is who are the best football players in this draft, and McCaffrey is certainly one, and Jabril Peppers is another.
That was Mel Kiper. His latest mock draft, the Grade A mock, was released yesterday. It can be found on ESPN.com on the NFL draft page. Mel, thanks as always for joining us.
Always a pleasure, guys. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the First and Last podcast. You can listen and subscribe to all ESPN podcasts in the Listen tab of the ESPN app. First and Last.